All right, we're going to dive into what is basically a high-stakes theological mystery. It's a wild story about a confrontation in ancient Jerusalem where just one single baffling quote might be the key to unlocking a much, much bigger cosmic drama. So this is the accusation, and you have to understand this is a death sentence. The crowd literally has stones in their hands. They are ready to execute Jesus for blasphemy. The tension is just absolutely through the roof. But instead of backing down, or trying to clarify things in a simple way, Jesus gives a defense that is so strange, so unexpected, that for centuries it's left pretty much everyone scratching their heads. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack. Okay, so let's really get into this scene because the setting here is everything. We're in the temple in Jerusalem. It's the Feast of Dedication, a festival that celebrates the cleansing of the temple and, really, the sovereignty of God. A crowd basically corners Jesus and they demand a straight answer. Are you the Christ? And his response just escalates everything, like immediately. He says, I and this Father are one. Now, to them, this wasn't just a claim of agreement. No, this was a claim to divine identity. And their reaction is instant. They pick up stones. So with his life hanging in the balance, Jesus doesn't run. Instead, he poses a question, and he quotes their own scriptures right back at them in a way that, honestly, on the surface, seems to make things even more confusing. And this right here, this is the quote at the heart of our whole mystery. It's pulled directly from Psalm 82. I said, you are gods. I mean, what a stunning, almost jarring thing to say at a moment like this. And that brings us to the big question, right? What on earth was the logic of this defense? And why didn't it calm things down? In fact, the text tells us the crowd only tried harder to arrest him afterward. What's going on here? Well, for a very long time, the most common explanation, the one you'll hear most often, is that Jesus was just making a really clever legal argument. This view assumes that the gods mentioned in Psalm 82 weren't actually divine beings, but were powerful human judges or rulers. So the logic here is something called a lesser to greater argument. Jesus is basically saying, look, if your own scripture can call mortal men gods just because they represent God's authority, then surely I, who the Father actually sent into the world, can call myself the Son of God without it being blasphemy. It's a clever move. But, and this is a big but, this is where that traditional view really starts to break down when you look closely. I mean, it feels a little anticlimactic, doesn't it? It almost sounds like Jesus is watering down his earlier, incredibly powerful claim of being one with the Father. And, most importantly, it just doesn't explain why the crowd got more angry, not less. So, to really solve this thing, we have to do what Jesus did. We have to go directly to the source. The key isn't just that one line he quoted. No, it's the entire context of Psalm 82. The psalm uses the Hebrew word Elohim when it says gods. Now, this is crucial. While Elohim can, of course, refer to the one God of Israel, back then it was a much broader term for any being from the spiritual, non-physical realm. Think angels, spirits, that sort of thing. And boom, the very first verse of Psalm 82 paints this incredible picture. It shows God, the supreme Elohim, taking his place in a heavenly assembly, a council, to pass judgment on these other Elohim. This is not a human courtroom. This is a cosmic one. So the story in the psalm goes like this. God calls this council together and he accuses these divine beings of corrupting justice on earth. Then he passes a sentence on them. Even though you're gods, you're going to die like mortal men. And the psalm finishes with this desperate plea for God himself to rise up and reclaim the nations from these corrupt spiritual rulers. Okay, so let's bring this new context back to that confrontation in Jerusalem. Because with this divine council idea in mind, Jesus's quote suddenly isn't a retreat. It's an escalation, a massive one. I mean, just look at the difference here. The first theory sees this as a defensive comparison to men, right? A theological step back. But the divine council view, it sees it as an offensive claim of identity. He's not comparing himself to anyone. He's identifying himself with the judge in the psalm. So this is the critical question, isn't it? When Jesus quotes, I said you are gods, is he lumping himself in with those lesser, corrupt divine beings who are being condemned in the psalm? No, not even close. He's aligning with the one who is doing the speaking in the psalm. He is identifying with the God who stands in the council and passes judgment.
He's claiming the role of the divine judge for himself.
And when you see it that way, suddenly everything just clicks into place. This interpretation resolves all those narrative problems and theological tensions we saw with that first theory.
So let's just trace the logic one last time. The puzzle was that bizarre quote and the super angry response. The key was realizing Psalm 82 is all about a divine showdown. This means Jesus' claim wasn't a comparison at all, but an identification with the ultimate judge. And that's the resolution. The crowd's anger makes total sense because they heard him doubling down on his claim to be God.
This reading really does four things just beautifully. It keeps the Gospel of John's incredibly powerful presentation of Jesus intact. It perfectly explains why the tension in the story got worse, not better. It frames Jesus' entire mission as part of this cosmic battle to reclaim the world. And it shows why he insisted Scripture cannot be broken, because the reality of this divine counsel was written right there in their own holy texts.
So, we end up right back where we started, but with a completely new perspective. A single line of scripture, when you lift it out of its context, can seem weak or confusing. But when you put it back in its original story, it can become one of the most audacious, powerful claims ever made. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often does the context of a story change everything we think we know?